Hello, my name is AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming to you today to bring you another video in my series of chess videos on my game of the month. Every month I try to do a game of the month, and this is my game of the month for March 2012. The game is between two fairly well-known grandmasters, Grandmaster Krishnan Sasikiran, or Sasikiran. He is an Indian and from the country of India, and from Grandmaster Nigel Short from England. Short is a well-known grandmaster, having once played a world championship match against Garry Kasparov in 1993. Anyway, Short won this tournament, a Gibraltar tournament, which is held in the spring of every year. He had a very tough job in the last round. In order to tie for first, he had to beat a 2700 with the black pieces. So, needless to say, that's almost just like climbing Mount Everest, in my opinion. And in addition, he played Hu Yaifan in the playoff as well, and defensively defeated Hu Yaifan in the playoff. So, congrats to Nigel Short for a well-played tournament. But anyway, in this tournament, he has to play Grandmaster Sasikiran, and he has to win with the black pieces. So let's look at how he was able to do that. Anyway, the game starts off d4, knight f6, c4, e6. There's a lot to be said for this move order. Basically, what black's doing is he's keeping open the option of possibly playing a Nimzo Indian here. In other words, if knight c3, bishop b4, that would be a Nimzo Indian. But now a lot of books advise using the move order c5 here. And now, of course, after d5, if black wants to, he's playing a b5 move. But here our interest and our primary objective is to cover the lines of the Benoni, because that is the game that we're looking at this month is a Benoni. But anyway, let's look at the main line here. And again, in this month, we're looking at the main lines of the Benoni, especially interested in when white fianchettos his king bishop, which seems to be what the higher rated players do when facing the Benoni. But anyway, e6, knight c3, d5, e takes d, c takes d, d6, knight f3, g6, 7 g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castles, white castles, knight bd7, knight d2, a6, 11 a4, rook e8, knight c4, knight e5, 13, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, 14 e4, and now rook e8. And basically, this position is almost close to equal. Maybe white is just slightly better. He has a little bit more space and maybe just a tiny bit of room. But if white does have an edge here, it's a very small one. And anyway, this line is covered in MCO 15, page 653, column number 5, and all notes. Good example of this position would be the game Karbov Adianto, which was a match game they played in Jakarta, India in 1997, and it was drawn in 45 fighting moves. Basically, black was down a piece, but he got a lot of pawns for the piece, and eventually at the end, all the pawns came off the chessboard, or were coming off the board, so it was agreed draw because white had an extra piece, but basically it was, it wasn't really worth anything because all the pawns had been removed from the chessboard. But anyway, let's go ahead and back up to our actual game here. This starts off d4, knight f6, to c4, e6. Now again, that's not the normal move order for playing a Benoni, but I actually like it, and here's one of the reasons. A lot of times white will avoid playing knight f3, playing knight c3, because he's afraid of bishop b4 facing the Nimzo Indian. That's actually to black's advantage, because one of the main lines of one of the toughest lines to face when you're playing the black side of the Benoni is the Taimanov variation, and that's where white plays early e4 and f4, and those lines are not available to white, if he delays, if he plays knight f3, simply because if he plays knight f3 on this move, then the f pawn is blocked. So basically, by playing this move order, black can oftentimes avoid one of the more potent lines for white versus the Benoni. But anyway, white plays g3. Now g3 is what seems to be the choice of higher rated players when they have to play against a Benoni opening, and that's what it seems to be. Looking at TWIC every week for many years, and most of the time I look at the Benoni games first. I have a list of games I like to look at interesting King's Indian games, decisive games, and also Benoni games. Those are two of my favorite openings. But anyway, when looking at the TWIC, the Week in Chess every week, one of the first things that I look at is the fianchetto, the Benoni games. And most of the time, a grandmaster, when he has the white pieces and has to face the Benoni, it's higher rated player, he seems to choose the fianchetto systems. And that's our focus for this month, is the Modern Benoni, this game here, and also lines where white fianchettos his king bishop. So white plays g3. Black plays c5, of course, that leads to the Modern Benoni. D5, E takes D, C takes D. Now you have to ask yourself here, now D6, why maybe short would play the modern Benoni. Most grandmasters consider the Benoni to be extremely risky, and they normally don't try this opening. However, short's a fighting player, and he needed absolutely to win in this game, and so I think he decided to avoid anything like a Slav or anything like that, because those are balanced pawn structures, and those are much more difficult to win. He purposely chose this opening because it does lead to an unbalanced pawn structure, and therefore I think it felt like if he was going to play for a win, that this was the better choice, because it's much more difficult for white to just simply trade pieces on the open file in a balanced pawn structure and make a draw. But anyway, knight c3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, knight f3, black castles, white castles, knight bd7. Now, these are pretty standard conventional moves, I guess, and basically this is standard opening, and this position is a very common one for this particular opening, especially in the Benoni where white fianchettos his king bishop. Now here white plays a4. That wasn't really necessary here. I usually prefer to play that move if I'm white till after black has played a6 and is threatening to play b5, then you go ahead and play a4. But white plays a4 here. Black plays h6. Now the engines don't like that move, but again, you got to remember what short was trying to do. I think basically his job here, the goal that he had set for himself, was to play an unbalanced game, prevent exchanges, and also to create a system, create a position later on to where basically he could play for a win. So he's willing to make moves that are maybe less than absolute best, especially he's trying to avoid moves which will allow a lot of easy exchanges by white. In other words, preventing bishop g5 and queen d2 gives white a tremendous kingside bind, and I think once that happens, I know as black, I've had this position as black, I played the Benoni for many, many years. I started playing the Benoni when I was just a teenager, and I'm now 54, so I have many years of experience playing the Benoni as black, and I can tell you that when white is allowed to set up a kingside bind with moves like bishop f4, bishop g5, and queen d2, and black cannot play h6, then basically it's very hard to challenge anything white does on the king side. Basically, white dominates play, and he gets a bind on those squares. So I think that basically is short's main idea there. Again, the engines don't really like that move. It's a little bit, it causes the warning lights to sort of flicker there, and the valuations go up quite a bit for white, but again, I think it's acceptable because of what short was trying to do here. He was trying to create an unbalanced position to where later he could play for a win. White plays queen c2, queen e7, rook a3. This is a rather unusual move. Frees up the rook, gets it off this diagonal so it's not hanging. White can play b4, but I just don't feel like this is the place where this rook should go to a3. Probably just rook e1 and e4 were probably better ideas for white. This looks a little extravagant here in this position. I've seen this line, but I'm not real fond of it. Black plays a6. This is standard in these type of lines. Knight d2. Now this is also a standard type of maneuver by white. It's a very standard motif. The knight goes to d2 and c4, and very oftentimes, if after knight d2 c4, the queen's bishop comes to f4, and then black has difficulty in defending his e-pawn, so black has to be aware of that. So anyway, black plays rook b8. Black is preparing the pawn thrust here, b5. White plays a5. Basically the idea of a5 is trying to prevent b5, but black is going to now be forced to play b5 because otherwise he simply can't allow white to establish a bind with knight c4, so he's going to go ahead and play b5. The move a5, in my opinion, almost forces black to go ahead and play b5 and start his counterplay. So anyway, b5, a takes b, knight takes b, b3. Again, now that, in my opinion, now this rook here on a3 looks rather stupid. I mean, it's not attacked, it's not stuck on the diagonal, there's no pins, but also too it's completely out of play, at least for the moment. Knight g4, bishop b2, f5. Black's gaining kingside space. Now that move is very risky, and Fritz doesn't like that at all. Fritz prefers knight e5 instead of f5, and Houdini likes a rather odd h5. I let it run for several hours, and it chose the move h5 there. And I also did a DPA with Houdini. Again, it chose that move h5, which I'm not really sure what the point of that move is, other than just gaining space and kind of keeping, say, a white knight off of the g4 square long term, and maybe even looking at the idea of h5, h4, and exchanging and slightly corrupting white's king side. But anyway, black plays f5 here. Again, short's looking to play aggressive moves. He's looking to generate some kind of attacking chances here. And of course, this all could have blown up in short's face if things had gone the wrong way, if maybe white had played perfect chess. But, only an engine plays perfect chess. Humans most of the time cannot play perfectly. So I think short is justified. Certainly, he's playing all out to win here, and he certainly doesn't leave anything, left behind. He's certainly bringing his whole game, and he's doing everything in his power to create an unbalanced position and try to maybe even generate a kingside attack. But now h3, according to the engines, is white's best move. But he plays e3, g5, rook goes back to a1. Again, that rook was completely out of play. Bishop b7, rae1, rbe8, h3, knight e5, and now white plays f4. And the first player's moves have not been completely without, chess logic, and he hasn't played horrible moves every single move. Sasikiran, it was a 2700, FIDE 2700 coming into this tournament. So he's not a terrible player. In fact, at one time I believe he was leading the tournament. But anyway, white actually has a little bit of an edge here in this position. So, again, I think both players are playing pretty well. I mean, neither player is playing terribly. And white's, playing to gain some space on the king side and maybe slow black down in that sector just a little bit. Maybe black plays knight g6, and now white sees that basically black's looking to open the g file and start an attack, so he moves his king out of the way. And that move's not terrible. In fact, that's move is the first choice of many of the chess engines. I would have played knight c4 here, hoping that black would go ahead and exchange, and maybe I get this b pawn target off the b pile and get it on c4. And that also gives me an open b file for my rooks. But and that's an engine move too. But anyway, that's probably the best move. According to a consensus of all the engines, knight c4 seems to be maybe the best move for white. But anyway, white played king h2, g takes f4, g takes f4. Now that was the first really less than best move that Sasikiran has made here. And basically I know what he was worried about here. He was worried about taking with the e-pawn. And let's just look at that very quickly. This was the best move according to the computers, but it required basically white being willing to give up his two rooks for the queen. Anyway, after queen takes e1, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, 26, knight c4, knight takes, b takes, rook f7, bishop f3. Those are all computer moves. They're all engine moves. I've checked it with many of the engines, Shredder and Deep Junior and all that good stuff, and also Fritz 13 and Houdini 2.0. But those are all engine moves. That's pretty much what the engines considered by consensus to be best for both sides. Now here white holds a fairly large edge. Both Houdini and Fritz agree that white is much better here. What we have is normally in chess, a master doesn't want to give up his queen for two rooks because usually the two rooks long term are a better, it's two pieces versus one, and they can combine against targets. But here we have a very unusual, rather unusual chess scenario that the rooks have no immediate targets to double up on. And basically here in this position, according to the computers, the queen is actually much better. And I think that was what Sasikiran probably didn't realize or wasn't able to analyze deeply enough. Again, this is a chess game played in a tournament and over-the-board chess, and both players have a limited amount of time. So, obviously Sasikiran wasn't using an engine. He didn't have an engine available to him, so he wasn't able to deeply evaluate these positions like I've been able to do overnight analysis and such. But anyway, this would have been the best line for white, and basically the rooks, don't have a lot of open files, and there's not any convenient, squares that they can double up on. They can't double on the 7th. I mean, this square is just very well guarded. So basically here, it's a rather unusual, in fact, a somewhat exceptional position that the two rooks are not better than the queen. The queen is actually better than the two rooks. But anyway, backing up to the actual game here. In this position, short played G23, G takes F4. White took with the G pawn, and that was probably actually maybe even slightly dubious. Again, it was best to take with the E pawn, but that involved giving up his two rooks for the queen, and maybe either he didn't have enough time to look at it, or he looked at it and just didn't like it, because normally the normal rule of thumb is that two rooks are better than a queen. But here again, we had an exception to that rule. But white played G takes F4. And now short, he's just going to clear the G file to begin an attack. This open line here, the open G file, is going to be a major avenue for black, and he's going to use it. But anyway, knight c4, knight takes, b takes, bishop c8. White's just getting all of his pieces pointed at the king. Besides, with this pawn on d5, the bishop was on. We'll just back up one move. Hang on. Let's just back up one move. After white played b takes c4, this bishop here is not serving any useful purpose anyway, because there's a pawn here and it's locked down by another pawn on c4. So this bishop may as well redeploy to a new diagonal. Bishop c8, And now white played rook f3. I think knight a4 was what the computers recommend here. Knight a4. White, white can exchange off black's dark squared bishop. This is a very potent piece for white, and it just leads to a slightly better position for white. But he didn't play knight a4 here. He played rook f3. And short just goes ahead and begins using the g file. Rook g8, rook g1, bishop f6. And it says here black, it might have a small edge, but black does have an advantage here, it's a very small one. And white is, in my opinion, white's either showing signs of time pressure or maybe being a little bit uncomfortable with his position, or maybe even both. But here white's, he hasn't chosen the absolute best moves. Seems to be somewhat drifting a little bit, maybe not finding the best plan. Now here he had the idea of just exchanging everything off. I think his idea was, I'm just going to allow all the rooks to come off on the g file, and if I need to, I can make an easy draw. I think that was the plan, but that's not what happens. Here white played bishop to h1. And basically the idea of that move again was to, double the rooks on the g file, maybe play knight a4, and everything comes off the chessboard. And there I think white would be okay. But there's a problem with the move bishop h1. And I'm going to go ahead and stop talking for a minute. And if you like, you can go ahead and pause the video. In fact, I highly recommend that you go ahead and pause the video and analyze the position for as long as you like, and then try to guess what black does next. But just go ahead and do that, and do that now, and I'll stop talking. But when I stop talking, go ahead and pause the video. Okay, if you did as I asked, you went ahead and paused the video. And basically the idea was, to study the position as long as you like and try to guess, again, reviewing the last couple of moves. Black played rook g8, 27 rook g8. White went rook g1. Black played bishop f6. And here white played bishop h1. And that move was actually a mistake. And if you studied the position and did like I asked, pause the video, and hopefully you tried to analyze and tried to guess the move here, or if you're not familiar with the game, then you would have tried to guess what black's next move is. The problem with this move bishop h1 is the king has no escape squares here, and short instantly sees that. He plays a very alert move, knight e5, which by the way hits the rook, threatens knight takes rook check. And you can't take the knight. Well, let's just go ahead and look at what happens if white takes the knight. It's a double question mark move according to computers. Bishop takes e5 check. He's got to stick a rook in the way because the king has no squares there. Rook takes g1, king takes g1, queen g5 check, king f1, bishop takes f4, e takes f4, queen takes f4 check, queen f2, queen takes c4 check, king g1, bishop d7. Now here white has two minor pieces for the rook, but black has three extra pawns, and the white king is just in real bad shape. And according to the computer also too, this bishop in the corner, I want to point out that this bishop corner blocked by its own pawn is pretty almost useless in this particular position. So anyway, basically the computer considers black to have overwhelming threats. I mean, the white king is wide open, black's pieces combine very well on the light squares and the open files, and white's pieces are not working well at all. In fact, they're almost, this bishop's blocked by the knight, this bishop's blocked by the pawn. The knight has no good squares. I mean, all the good squares there's really no good advanced squares the knight can get to anytime soon. So basically, black's in a lot of trouble. Black's rook's coming to the open g file, maybe with check. So in this position, I think black has got a lot of problems. I mean, white has a lot of problems here, and the computers, all the engines consider that to be an overwhelming position for black. So anyway, we looked at what happens if white was foolish enough to take on e5. Got to give Sasikiran some credit. He's a 2700 grandmaster, and he quickly found his way. He figured out without too much delay that taking on e5 was suicide. So he plays rook g3, which I think was pretty much close to forced. Rook takes g3. Rook takes g3, and now black clips a free pawn. Knight takes c4, and also too, it's not just a free pawn. This knight's on a wonderful square, and it's hitting the e3 square, threatening to take another pawn. So basically now white's, if not clearly lost, he's much, much worse. And now he's forced to retreat there to guard the pawn. Otherwise, white will drop another pawn on e3. Black plays bishop h4, attacking the rook, rook f3, queen g7. The computers all like bishop d7 here. That was clearly a better move. But grabbing the g file was obviously a lot of fun too, because he's going to double up on the g file with some awesome tactical threats. So you really can't blame short from doing that. And he was probably getting short of time at this point too. I'm sure he'd put a lot of energy into this game. In fact, I watched several of the games from this event online. They were available live online, both on several websites. And so anyway, here short was running a little bit low on time, but Bishop d7 was slightly better move than queen g7, but queen g7 isn't terrible. Black's still much better. Knight e2, black plays knight b6, and you know, black holds a fairly solid edge here. He's up a clear pawn, and probably with absolute best play, he's going to win, unless white finds some brilliant way to hold, to draw some fortress kind of position. But it's not an easy win. In fact, to find a clear win, you know, it's going to be very, very hard. And basically, white's job here is now to rearrange his pieces and put them on really good squares and put every piece on its optimum square. That's generally what I tell all my students, especially, you know, when you find yourself in a bad position. Bishop on c1, knight on e2, bishop in the corner, rook here on a useless, it's not on an open file. It's very clear to me that white needs to rearrange his pieces and get his pieces to better squares. But here, white kind of, he tries something, and you really can't blame, again, Sasikiran for trying something. He was probably short of time here, and also too, he's breaking the center. He's trying to break the pieces for his break the position open for his two pieces, allow his pieces some room and get some piece activity. But all this does is wind up dropping another pawn. You know, now black played rook takes e4, give that move an exclam, and now white plays rook b3, and it looks like short's miscalculated. Short has a hanging knight on b6, and his rook's double attacked by both the bishop and the queen. So it looks like to me that short's going to lose material, at least if you're just looking at the position for the very first time, or you haven't had a lot of time to analyze it. So if all this is correct, I mean, if short hasn't made a mistake, then what was it that white or black missed here? I mean, what is the response to this move? Well, short comes up with a very ingenious move that I already seen is rook e8, and there's based on a very cute tactic, is that this rook on b3 is performing an absolutely vital function. If rook takes b6, well, let's just quickly look at that here. Well, you don't really, I don't have it analyzed, but anyway, if white were to play rook takes b6, it's a double question mark move, because black simply plays rook takes here, check, and then if queen takes rook, then queen g3 checkmate. Okay, that's just a very simple tactic, and you should be able to see that without an engine, or without me actually showing the analysis. So here, because Sasikiran cannot take on b6, he's basically got to give his king a square. So bishop f3, and now white plays bishop f2. And now once more, if he takes the knight on b6, what short has a new threat, rook takes knight check, either queen takes rook, queen g3 check, and then queen g1 mate. So again, we see that same threat renewed, and this bishop f2 was a very nice move, because this bishop it's nice, it's near the king, it's on the edge of the board, but it's not really at a premium square. And by placing it on f2, now he's hitting two squares near the white king. So it's improving the square, the posting of this dark squared bishop, and if the knight moves, then the black bishop can swing around to this monster d4 square here. So that was a very nice tactic, and you know, again, short is known for finding good tactics even in very quick games, blitz games on the internet. He's one of the top rated players on the Play Chess website. But anyway, bishop g4, and that was pretty much forced. The computer says that's almost forced, nothing else is going to work. And now black just plays, you know, queen g6, unpinning the pawn, guards this pawn, doesn't drop a pawn. Now he's just threatening pawn takes bishop. In other words, the answer to rook takes knight is just simply pawn takes bishop. The queens come off, and you know, white being down material should not be exchanging here. But that's actually what he does. I think if I'd have been white, I would have looked for some other move, maybe rook back to f3, I don't know, something here, but threatening the bishop. But anyway, he starts exchanging off here. Now this allows the queens to come off. Queen takes g6, rook takes g6, rook takes d6 check, king f7, knight g3. Now here it's 4 pawns to 3, so it's not an easy win. White just has one pawn. I mean, black has just one pawn, but he's threatening to play pawn takes pawn on h3 and have just an overwhelming position. But so basically, you know, he can't allow that to happen. And it's black's move here after knight g3. Black plays rook e1, again renewing the threat against the bishop on c1, bishop d2, rook g1. Again, closing in. Notice how short's got that killer instinct. He's just closing in on the white king. So now bishop takes g3 or rook takes g3 is threatened. You know, it depends on what white plays there. So basically, there's 2 hits on g3, and black cannot afford to ignore that. He got cute here. He played rook f6 check here. You know, I think he was hoping that taking was impossible, but after takes, knight e4 check, king f7, knight takes f2, rook a1, and now the rest of these moves really don't need too much comment. H takes g4, rook a2, bishop e3, bishop takes g4. white obviously cannot recapture because the knight on f2 is pinned to the king by the rook on a2. So king g3, bishop f5, bishop takes c5, rook a5. And now after the bishop moves, chomp the pawn on d5, black has an extra in exchange and 2 pawns versus a bishop and knight and 1 pawn. It's a very, very easy win. And at this point, Sasikiran, basically, he's had enough. I mean, he's had all he can handle. He's come up with every tricks. He's out of tricks. And he knows that he's dead lost. And he decides it's basically time to raise the white flag of surrender. He gives up at this point. I can't say enough about how well Nigel Short played this game. I mean, maybe he didn't find the absolute best engine move every single time. Not too many grandmasters do. I study grandmaster games virtually on a daily basis, and every week I look at the very best grandmaster games that were played, and I almost always, well, first I look at them first without an engine, and then I turn on my favorite engine, which is usually Houdini or Fritz 13, but also too I'll use say Deep Junior or Deep Shredder or one of the other engines too, because I like to use different engines, and kind of gives you every engine has a different, slightly different style, and a lot of times in an equal position, every engine will pick a slightly different move, and it reflects what its programmer programmed it for. I used to like a program called Hierarchs. I don't know if they've updated that lately, but that's also a very good engine. That's more of a positional engine. So every engine does something slightly different. But anyway, I always look at the Grandmaster games every week, and I'm always using some form of engine, usually either Fritz or Houdini. But I can tell you for a fact that most Grandmasters do not play the best moves every single time. And I've never seen a game where a Grandmaster played the computer move every single time unless it was a real short game. And anyway, the Short just played a wonderful game here. The final position speaks for itself. White is completely lost. And, Short just played a wonderful game. Again, he convincingly defeated Hu Yaifan in the finals there. And so, it was just a wonderful game by Short. Can't say enough about how well he played this, how ingenious he was, his tactics, his fighting spirit. The rather risky choice of the Benoni as his opening choice, but it was a play-to-win situation, and he managed to do that. Most masters, when they find themselves in that situation, basically they come up short, because that's a very difficult situation to be in. And for a Short to succeed in such difficult circumstances is just so admirable, and I can't say enough about that. But anyway, that's my game of the month. Be sure to check out my webpage for this game. It will be posted by the time this video is posted. And I hope you enjoy my webpage. I hope you enjoy my videos. And if you'd like to support my webpage and video efforts, please go to the PayPal website. That's www.paypal.com. And just use my email, lifemasteraj@yahoo.com. And go ahead and give a donation if you feel so motivated. And I'd like to thank you for watching my videos, and thank you for looking at my webpage. I hope you enjoyed it. Even if you don't support it, I hope you enjoy my efforts every month. And I hope you'll keep on watching, and have a great day.